Hello there, welcome to the Football Bloc. My name is Brandon. Today, I'm going to give you my predictions for the 2023 Gold Cup Semifinals. So if that sounds interesting, let's hop right into it.
One step beyond.
So the 2023 Gold Cup Semifinals have finally arrived, and we only have 4 teams left, only 2 matches to decide who goes to the final. I'm going to give a breakdown of each of these matches, and then I'm going to give you my prediction for who is going to win and who is going to lose. So without further ado, let's hop right into it, and let's start off with the first match here. We have Jamaica versus Mexico. This is a matchup which has a lot of history behind it. Obviously, in 2017, these two teams went up against each other in the 2017 Gold Cup semifinals. Jamaica scored a beautiful free kick from, I believe it was Lawrence, in the 87th minute or something like that. Jamaica went on to the final to unfortunately lose to the USA. 2 years prior to that, Jamaica actually defeated the USA in the semifinals and got to the final. Where they lost to Mexico there. Unfortunate back-to-back losses in the finals. But still, Jamaica is a team that has some winning culture behind them, at least in the Gold Cup. Versus Mexico is a team that has won this Gold Cup more than anyone else. They've won it 8 times. They're looking to make it 9 times. I think that we're in for a classic game here. I think this could be a really exciting match. There's a lot at stake. Obviously, both of these teams are going into it with very different mindsets. Mexico is a team with, as I described it before, with a giant cloud, a dark cloud looming over their camp. You know, this is one of the worst Mexican teams that we've seen in years. They were eliminated from the World Cup group stage for the first time in almost 3 decades. They got completely outplayed by the U.S. in the Nations League. Abysmal performance. Their team, for the first time, is less talented than the U.S. They are no longer the undisputed king of North America. Meanwhile, you know, they're playing decent in this tournament. They're going far, but it's going to take a lot to really win over the Mexico fans. Even winning this tournament, I think, is not going to fully win over Mexico fans, nor should it, because this team should have ambitions way higher than the Gold Cup. Jamaica, on the other hand, is a team that has always kind of had internal issues, particularly as of late, but they're a team that is extremely talented on paper. You look at a guy like Leon Bailey or Mikel Antonio or Damari Gray or Andre Blake. These are some of the best players in this, region, and it's just about time that they try to actually form into a competitive team and a team that finally wins something. Because as I said before, they've gotten close to victory and they've never tasted it. So many view this tournament, 2023, as the turning point potentially for this team. Going into this tournament, I think Jamaica was in poor form, but they've turned it around slightly. They've had a tie against the U.S. in the opening match, a game that both teams really didn't play all that well, in my opinion. They were really trying to figure themselves out as a team and also figure out their opponents. But then Jamaica had 2 very lopsided victories against Trinidad and Tobago and then against St. Kitts and Nevis. Games you'd expect them to win, games you can't really take much out of. And then they beat Guatemala in the last match. I think it was a professional win. It was a game where they were the better team overall, but it was dicey at times. I think Guatemala really frustrated them, but the way the game was and how open it was and how it was just attack after attack from either team, that really benefited Jamaica, and ultimately they came away with a winner. On the other hand, Mexico started off the tournament very strong with a 4-0 crushing victory over Honduras. A similarly very important win over Haiti, a 3-1 win over Haiti, but they did lose 1-0 to Qatar in a shock loss there. And, yes, statistically, it didn't really matter. It was an insignificant game, but morale-wise, I think that was, not a good look. But they followed that up with a professional win over Costa Rica. Not a perfect victory, not a perfect performance, but a very necessary performance. And you look at these teams and how they line up against each other. I think that Mexico, for the most part, is a much more cohesive team. Even though they're missing a lot of their starters, I think if you just look at the back line, you look at the midfield, you look at the attack, even though the back line looks a little shaky at times, they're just much more of a cohesive team. Jamaica, I think, can be chaotic. They can be a little erratic as well. Not to mention, this Jamaica side, there's been so much hype around them. There's just so much expectations on them and rightfully so because of all the talent that they have. But I don't think they've really proved it yet. I don't think that they've really fully clicked. Yes, they've scored a lot of goals against weaker opposition. And yes, they kind of, gotten a result against Guatemala. They kind of limped over the finish line in many ways. I don't think that we've seen enough for them so far. And in any other tournaments, in any other era for Jamaica to make it this far, they'd be exceeding expectations. But when you think of all the hype that's around this team, it raises the expectations. And I don't think Jamaica has met those raised expectations. And Mexico, they're not perfect by any means. There are some visible flaws. But this is Mexico in the Gold Cup we're talking about. As I said before, they've won this tournament 8 times. They almost always make the final. It's very rare that they don't make the final. And I think that victory against Costa Rica proved that they still have that bravado in them because, that was a turning point, I think, in the last round because, like I said before, there's all this chaos going around behind the scenes, but they were able to pull out a relatively routine win over Costa Rica. And I think we're going to see somewhat of a repeat there. I think it's going to be a very close match. I think Jamaica will have their chances. I think Ochoa will be troubled many times, but when you look at these two teams, I think Mexico, especially in midfield and attack, is a much more cohesive team. Yes, Jamaica have tons of stars. They just don't really seem to work together. They just don't really have it, in my opinion. So I'm going to say Mexico come away with a 1-0 victory here. I think it's going to be a set-piece goal. I just have a funny feeling. I think it's going to be a set-piece goal. A header from Edson Alvarez, and then 1-0 to Mexico. It's going to be a close game, lots of chances for either side, but in the end of the day, Mexico just have much more experience and much more cohesion, and they will go to the final. So in the next match, in the other semifinal, we have Panama versus the USA. I think these two teams have been very exciting going forward. They've had some wonderful individual performances. It goes without saying that the US is the second best team historically in CONCACAF, and at this point, even from an unbiased opinion, they are the best team overall in North America. They've won this tournament 7 times. If they were to win this, they would tie Mexico for the most amount of titles. They also are the champions of the Nations League. They also won the last Gold Cup. They're the reigning champions of that. They're also the winners of the last Nations League as well. They went farther than any other CONCACAF team in the last World Cup. They have the most talented squad in the region, but they didn't bring all those talented players. This is, for the most part, a C squad full of youth guys as well as players on the fringe. So that has had some complications, and I think Panama, flip side, Panama have been playing really well, but this is a Panamanian team that is similar to Jamaica. They've gotten very far in this competition. They got to the final in 2013. They almost got to the final. They probably should have got to the final in 2015. They've been to semifinals, quarterfinals, things like that in the past, but they've never tasted victory. But particularly in this tournament, I think you can make a serious argument that just in terms of their performances, outside of the talent that they have on the field, just in terms of every single match they played, you can make a serious argument that they have been the best team so far. I would even say they've probably been playing the best football because they completely outplayed Costa Rica in that first match. They also had a strong victory against Martinique, and then in a game where they statistically didn't even need to win, they were still able to score 2 goals on El Salvador and deny them from getting a victory there. And then in the last match, they obliterated Qatar. Granted, it's Qatar's C squad, and they're also missing a lot of players to suspension, but they completely tore them apart. As I've said numerous times throughout this video, or throughout these videos covering the Gold Cup in 2023, Panama's strength on their wings, their ability to get the ball from their wingbacks to the wingers and then cross it into the center, to their strikers or to people making late runs into the box has been devastating. No team has been able to really have an answer to that so far in this tournament. The U.S., on the other hand, they had that kind of strange draw against Jamaica, and then they flipped the switch, had two crushing 6-0 victories over St. Kitts and Nevis and Trinidad and Tobago. Again, you can't really take a whole lot of that because of how the talent gap is, how large the talent gap is. Then they had a hard-fought 2-2 draw against Canada, which required penalties. The U.S. ultimately went through, and I think the U.S. was by far the better team throughout this match. I think that they had better chances, they defended better, but Canada had a few opportunities, and they were clinical, even if they were lucky. So the U.S. is vulnerable. They aren't indestructible. They can make mistakes. They are still a team that's full of youth players and fringe players. So there is going to be some mistakes here and there. You're going to see a guy misplace a pass. You're going to see, a player making the wrong decision in the box. Things like that. They do tend to create a lot of chances as well. And as we saw against Canada and even against Jamaica to a certain extent, they didn't put all of them away. So when you compare these two teams against each other, I think, like the other semifinal, this is going to be a very close match. I think it will be very open as well because both of these teams don't really pay much attention to defending. They just like to go for it. They like to go for the attack. And as a result, they tend to be, very open and dynamic going forward. But they do tend to leak a few chances at the back. I think in this match here, the U.S. is going to open the score maybe, towards the end of the first half or something like that. Jesus Fajeda is going to score a tap-in. He scored against Panama before. I think he will increase his tally here. He's been on fire this tournament. And then I think into the second half, Panama is going to grow into the match. Like I said before, no team has really come up with an answer to the strength that Panama has on their wings, particularly in terms of crossing. The U.S. has given up a lot of chances so far. Their defenders have not really covered themselves in glory. Even Miles Robinson, who is one of my favorite players and who I think is probably the best defender that the U.S. has, at least in terms of center backs, has not really had the best tournament there. As a result, I think Panama will sneak back into the match. I think Fajardo, who has been a very, very good striker for Panama this tournament, will score a header and equalize at 1-1. I think from that moment on, the match might even go to extra time. And then I think coming off the bench, that dangerous connection between Cade Cowell and Brandon Vasquez will lead to the winner for the U.S. I think the U.S. is going to win 2-1. Brandon Vasquez is going to score the winner. He scored some late goals in this tournament. Actually, all of his goals in this tournament have been late goals, but he's been very clinical. I think at that point, the match is going to finish 2-1, U.S. going through to the final. I wouldn't be surprised if this match ends up being 3-2 or even like a 4-3 or something like that. I think there will be a lot of goals. But in the end of the day, similar to why I think Mexico is going to go through, the U.S. has so much more experience. They have a much stronger winning culture. Just like how I said, this is Mexico in the Gold Cup. This is the U.S. in the Gold Cup. You already kind of know what's going to happen here. I think it's going to be a U.S. versus Mexico final. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think of these matches. Do you disagree? Do you agree? Do you think that, there's going to be an upset? Do you think that, it's possible? These two teams, Mexico and the U.S., are not as strong as they have been as of recently. Also, Panama and Jamaica have had some very good runs of play. Do you think that we can see a crazy underdog final between Jamaica and Panama? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video with a friend. But anyway, guys, my name is Brandon. This has been the Football Bloc. Hope you guys have a nice rest of your night.
One step beyond.